Hi, my name is Phoebe, and I decided to do my project on the Barbie movie that came out last year. I was really excited when I saw this on the syllabus because I love this movie, and I think it's a really good example of female representation that was actually written by women. The major concepts that I think align with this movie the most is feminist media criticism and toxic masculinity. I think this movie does a really good job explaining issues that women have to deal with in a palatable way that even children can understand. The movie touches on how women are constantly pressured by society to look and act a certain way, and a lot of times these expectations are perpetuated by women as well, not just men in society. And I thought this movie did a really good job of showing that aspect of it as well. This movie also does a really good job of addressing toxic masculinity, which is something that isn't super common in pop culture, at least not like what I've seen. In my opinion, the writers were actually pretty tame with how they portrayed it, but I do understand that with larger films like this, addressing something like that in a harsher way would probably alienate a lot of the audience. So while it does make sense, I definitely do feel like they were pretty tame. A lot of it was portrayed very satirically, not necessarily over-exaggerated, but just very funny and goofy and not as serious as some of the other bigger topics that the movie touched on.
Yes.
One of the main reasons why I love this movie so much is because of its self-awareness. Barbie dolls have been a symbol of unrealistic beauty standards for a really long time, which I hate. It makes sense, but it really undermines a lot of the positive aspects of Barbie, like how it's, the goal of it is to show little girls that they can be anything they want, which is why, especially in the movie, it shows that Barbie can be, a pilot. One of the things that I love in the movie is right at the beginning, they show, Barbies that have all different kinds of jobs. There's President Barbie, and there's Barbies that are writers and winning awards. And I thought that was really cool that they addressed, that they still continued that theme while also addressing, some of the more negative aspects of Barbie and those perceptions of her as well. I really like that instead of ignoring the negative perspectives of Barbies, they address it and acknowledge that Barbies do reinforce feminine stereotypes. Gloria's monologue about how contradictory the expectations of women are in the film directly explains these criticisms through a feminist view.
You have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane, but if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women, because you're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood, but always stand out and always be grateful. But never forget that the system is rigged, so find a way to acknowledge that, but also always be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard, it's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us.
Now, this is slightly contrasted when the movie addresses toxic masculinity, because it did feel almost satirical when they did talk about that. in this context, handling the issue in that way made a lot of sense because a large portion of the movie's audience was children. So approaching a difficult topic like that head on probably wouldn't have worked out in this case. And what makes this part of the film important is, in the end, it showed that patriarchal societal norms do harm both men and women, which not a lot of people talk about. But, you know, when you're reinforcing those strict gender norms, it also harms men, and not a lot of people talk about that. So when Barbie develops her flat feet, she and the other Barbies are aware that it's an imperfection. Even though in this movie the Barbies are typically very supportive of each other, this specific situation does show that women do feel pressure of unrealistic beauty standards from other women, not just men.
I don't even have context for this, but my heels are on the ground. I'm no longer on tiptoes.
That's okay. Let me see.
The evidence for the portrayal of toxic masculinity throughout the movie is entirely in Ken's story arc. Initially, he's entirely focused on getting Barbie's attention, and his entire identity surrounds his obsession with her. Once he ends up discovering the patriarchy, once they go to the real world, he ends up using it as a way to make himself feel important. In doing this, he not only takes away all of the power and autonomy from the Barbies, but he also doesn't end up being fulfilled from that either. It's because that sense of power is superficial and it doesn't actually help him find his identity. Now, when Ken ends up letting go of the patriarchy and actually allows himself to feel his emotions, he ends up realizing he can be his own man without attaching his identity to Barbie or having, you know, dominance and power and control over women.
To be honest, when I found out the patriarchy wasn't about horses, I lost interest anyway. I just don't know who I am without you.
You're Ken.
But it's Barbie and Ken.
Maybe it's Barbie and it's Ken.
Ken is me?
Yes.
Ken is me.
And I'm Barbie.
Ken is me.
Ken is me.
Ken is me.
Ken is me.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that every single aspect of the Barbie movie is intentional, and by creating a film that discusses these complex topics in more of a simplified way, it really shows that these topics might not actually be that complicated at all. The writing, visuals, and dialogue all make it really clear that the main purpose of this movie is to address issues like female agency, identity, and unrealistic societal expectations that are placed on both men and women in the patriarchy. Throughout the movie, they explore the damaging results of having strict gender norms in a society. The exaggerated and satirical way that the movie portrays Ken's patriarchal society is a really clear way of intentionally addressing that a patriarchal society is bad for everyone and not just women. I just really love this movie, and I think it's a really good example of female representation, and it's just fun, and I like it a lot. It makes a lot of these issues more palatable for a wider audience, and it's unfortunate that we have to water these issues down, but I also think it's important that, you know, these issues are being talked about. And Barbie ended up being a huge movie, so I mean, millions upon millions of people watched it, and I think that's really important. So yep, thank you.